180 million tons. That is not the weight of an aircraft carrier fleet. That is the amount of sugar humanity consumes in just one single year. On average, every person on this planet ingests 24 kilograms of sugar annually. In some Western countries, that number skyrockets to 35 kilograms. It is everywhere. In your morning cup of coffee, in a warm loaf of bread, in sparkling sodas, and lurking in the most unexpected savory dishes. But let's step back for a moment. Our bodies were biologically programmed from the dawn of time to hunt for sweetness, the ultimate biological signal for survival energy. Yet, in the wild, sweetness is incredibly scarce. Ancient humans had to risk their lives fighting off aggressive bee swarms just to extract a few drops of honey, or chew tirelessly on wild fruits just to filter out a hint of natural sugar. So, how did a flavor that was once rarer and more precious than gold become mass-produced, perfectly pure, and sold for just a few dollars a kilo on every supermarket shelf? Today, step with us into the beating heart of a colossal industrial machine, where endless green fields meet the ruthless power of steel crushers, where the alchemy of heat and vacuum pressure metamorphoses a murky juice into crystal-clear perfection. This is the greatest metamorphosis in the plant kingdom. Welcome to the Mega Sugar Factory. Before it was imprisoned inside stainless steel machines, sugar had an extraordinary history, stretching across continents and reshaping the entire world. Many mistakenly believe sugar is a Western invention. They are entirely wrong. Its journey began over 10,000 years ago on the remote island of New Guinea, where humans first chewed sugarcane stalks to extract their sweetness. But it wasn't until the cane was brought to the Indian subcontinent that a true miracle occurred. Around 350 AD, under the Gupta dynasty, the Indians discovered how to press sugarcane juice and boil it down until it crystallized. They called these rough crystals SHARKARA, which in Sanskrit means gravel or sand. This word SHARKARA traveled along the Silk Road, transforming into sucre in Arabic, sucre in French, and finally, sugar in modern English. When European crusaders set foot in the Middle East in the 11th century, they tasted this sweet salt and were absolutely mesmerized. Throughout the Middle Ages, sugar was considered an elixir, a luxury spice reserved exclusively for kings and royalty. It was used to craft massive sugar sculptures at banquets simply to flaunt unimaginable wealth. But as Europe's insatiable demand exploded, a dark chapter opened. Sugarcane is a brutal crop requiring a harsh tropical climate and a massive labor force. To satisfy the old world's sugar cravings, colonial empires established endless sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean and South America. Millions of lives from Africa were chained and shipped across the Atlantic to harvest them. The sweetest taste known to humanity was, ironically, paid for with blood and the most brutal system of slavery in history. The world only truly changed when the Industrial Revolution erupted. And the man behind the metamorphosis of the modern sugar industry was an African-American engineer named Norbert Rillieux. In 1843, he invented the multiple effect evaporator under vacuum. This monumental invention allowed sugarcane juice to be boiled at much lower temperatures, saving colossal amounts of heat energy, producing purer sugar, and ending the highly dangerous practice of workers manually stirring vats of boiling syrup. From a privilege of kings, sugar was democratized. And to understand how ruthless and efficient the modern machine has become, we must go back to its source. The metamorphosis begins with fire. On massive sugarcane plantations stretching from Brazil and India to Australia, the harvest season often kicks off with an apocalyptic scene. Before harvesting, the sugarcane fields are intentionally set on fire. Don't worry, the flames sweep through incredibly fast. The fire incinerates all the sharp, dry leaves, and drives away venomous snakes and insects, but leaves the juice-filled sugarcane stalks completely intact thanks to their tough outer bark. The moment the smoke clears, massive mechanical harvesters weighing dozens of tons storm the fields. Like mechanical beasts, they slice at the roots, chop the tops, and hack the stalks into hand-sized billets in the blink of an eye. Massive trucks carrying hundreds of tons of sugarcane race through the morning mist, heading straight for the mega factory. Here, time is the ultimate enemy. Once cut, sugarcane begins to degrade and lose its sucrose content by the hour. They must be dissected immediately. Colossal cranes grab tons of sugarcane and drop them onto wide conveyor belts. After being brutally washed by high-pressure water jets to blast away mud and field ash, the stalks flow directly into the shredder. Hundreds of spinning alloy hammers, moving at tearing speeds, smash the tough outer bark and shatter the plant cell walls, turning the rigid bamboo-like stalks into a spongy, soaked mass of fiber. This fibrous mass then enters the most agonizing trial, the tandem mills. This is a system of 5 to 6 sets of deeply grooved, solid steel rollers, each weighing dozens of tons. The cane is squeezed through the incredibly narrow gaps between these rollers. Under terrifying hydraulic pressure reaching thousands of psi, murky, dark sugarcane juice gushes out like a waterfall. But the industry never tolerates waste. Between the milling sets, science applies a ruthless technique called imbibition. Steaming hot water is sprayed directly onto the exhausted fiber to dissolve the last stubborn sugar crystals clinging to the core, right before they are mercilessly crushed again. This technique allows the factory to wring out up to 96% of the sugar locked inside the plant. At the end of the conveyor belt, what remains is bagasse, a dry, lifeless mass of plant fiber. But this is the beauty of the sugar industry. Nothing is thrown away. This entire mountain of bagasse is fed straight into massive boilers burning at 1,000 degrees Celsius. They boil water, creating ultra-high pressure steam that spins turbines to generate electricity. The sugarcane miraculously provides the green power to fuel its own death and rebirth, with the excess electricity sold back to the national power grid. The freshly extracted juice is full of life, but it is far from appetizing. It is murky, dark green, and laced with dirt, plant gums, and proteins. The prelude to purification begins, the clarification stage. The juice is pumped through heat exchangers to reach its boiling point, and then chemistry takes over. Milk of lime, calcium hydroxide, is injected straight into the flow. The lime acts as a biological magnet at the molecular level. It neutralizes the juice's natural acidity while binding to all the suspended impurities, coagulating them into heavy mud flocks. The solution flows into a massive, tranquil clarifier tank. Here, the heavy black mud slowly sinks to the bottom, leaving a breathtakingly clear, amber-colored juice floating on top. However, that bottom layer of mud still holds precious sugar. The factory dumps this mud over a colossal, cloth-wrapped rotary vacuum filter. A ruthless vacuum suction wrings the very last drops of sugar water through the cloth, leaving behind a dry cake of mud that is sent back to fertilize the fields. At this point, the crystal-clear juice is still 85% water. To create sugar, we must banish the water. Welcome to the evaporation zone. The juice flows through a system of 5 massive, interconnected evaporator vessels. Instead of boiling the juice with direct fire, which would burn the sugar into caramel, the legacy of Norbert really utilizes a vacuum environment. By sucking out the air, the water inside the vessels can boil violently and evaporate at a cool 60 degrees Celsius. The steam rising from vessel 1 is used as the heat source to boil vessel 2, and so on, creating a perfectly energy-efficient machine. The juice flows through each vessel, losing water, thickening, darkening in color, and skyrocketing in sweetness, Brix level. When it emerges from the final vessel, it is no longer juice. It has become syrup, a heavy, viscous sludge containing 65% pure sugar. And now, the most magical, nerve-wracking moment of the entire process: crystallization. Inside massive vacuum pans, some as tall as a 3-story building, the syrup is carefully boiled under the watchful eyes of master sugar boilers. Despite modern computers, this remains an art form. They boil the syrup until it reaches supersaturation, the exact tipping point where the liquid cannot hold a single drop more of dissolved sugar. At that decisive second, the sugar boiler drops an incredibly fine sugar powder into the vat, known as the seed. Billions of these microscopic seeds plunge into the dark sea of syrup. Like a miracle of physics, the dissolved sucrose molecules instantly latch onto these seeds as if pulled by a magnet. Under a microscope, you would see perfect, hexagonal crystals begin to grow, multiply, and consume the entire space. This dense, sludgy mass of crystals and dark molasses is called mask white, but the sparkling sugar crystals are still trapped inside a thick coat of black molasses. They must be liberated through sheer violence. The mask white is dropped directly into the centrifuges. Imagine a gigantic stainless steel washing machine drum. The engines roar, and the drum spins at an extreme speed, 1,200 revolutions per minute. Centrifugal force, hundreds of times stronger than Earth's gravity, slams the sugar mass against a fine stainless steel mesh. The black molasses, being a liquid, is violently torn away, blasting through the microscopic holes of the screen. Simultaneously, jets of hot water spray directly into the spinning drum, washing away the most stubborn films of molasses clinging to the crystals. In just a few minutes, as the centrifuge slowly spins down, a glittering, golden yellow wall is revealed. This is raw sugar. It has large, golden brown crystals and carries the deep, robust flavor of molasses. For many countries, this is the final product, ready to be bagged and exported. But for the most demanding customers, chemical laboratories, or luxury Michelin star restaurants, that golden hue is still an imperfection. It requires one final metamorphosis at the refinery. to transform raw sugar into refined white sugar. Mountains of golden raw sugar are thrown into a vat of hot water and melted right back down into a liquid syrup. They are stripped of their physical form once more. Now, a purification process at the molecular level takes place. The liquid syrup is pumped through towering steel columns packed with ion exchange resin or granular activated carbon. These materials are apex predators of color. They ruthlessly absorb every microscopic pigment molecule and any lingering impurities. The liquid flowing out the bottom of these filters is now as transparent as spring water. Not a single trace of color. Not a single off flavor. This absolute pure syrup is once again boiled in a vacuum pan, seeded, and crystallized. When it passes through the centrifuge one last time, what remains on the mesh screen is no longer brown sugar. It is a blindingly white band of crystals, 99.9% pure, dazzling under the factory lights. These white crystals are still slightly damp. They tumble into massive rotary granulators, essentially a gigantic hairdryer, where alternating blasts of hot and cold air gently strip away the final traces of moisture, drying and polishing each individual grain. They then cascade over vibrating sieves, which meticulously sort the crystals by exact international standard sizes. The most flawless grains fall down into automated packaging hoppers. Tens of thousands of sacks and millions of tiny packets pour off the assembly lines, loaded onto trucks and cargo ships, radiating out into every corner of the globe. Step back and gaze at the majesty of this cycle. From a tall, wild grass rising from the mud and the tropical sun. It was scorched by fire, hacked by blades, and violently crushed by steel rollers weighing dozens of tons. It endured the chemical purges, the boiling heat of the vacuum, and the merciless tearing force of the centrifuge, only to finally metamorphose from a crude, murky juice into one of the most flawless, purest molecular structures humanity has ever produced on a scale of hundreds of millions of tons. A primal source of energy locked inside crystalline perfection. Next time you tear open a tiny packet of sugar, pour those snow-white crystals into your coffee and watch them swirl and vanish completely into the dark liquid. Remember, you are not merely tasting sweetness. You are dissolving a 10,000-year-old agricultural legacy, a monumental triumph of the Industrial Revolution, and the most ruthless, yet beautiful metamorphosis in nature. That is the power of modern industry. And that is the process.